Hey everybody, Mike Shea here, along with Ryan Mendoza. We are the writer and artist on Miskatonic High, and we are doing the commentary for Miskatonic High 21. How you doing, Ryan?
Doing great. Figuring out technology is a pain, though.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is indeed. Figuring out some technology for Trish and Anton and Dr. Herbert West is kind of a pain in the neck too. Um, Amazingly enough, we have reached Miskatonic High number 21, which is the first part of our season finale of, I guess, volume three, season three, whatever you want to call it. It's been a long time coming. Um, but there's a lot of storylines that are coming together for this that I know that I'm really excited finally came together. Um, I imagine you did too, Ryan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I still can't believe that we're beyond 20 issues by now
Right? It's crazy. Um,
and creeping closer to that 25th issue.
yeah. Well, let's remember at the end, we'll go ahead and start previewing that for people a little bit. So, hey, you got to stick around for an hour and a half before we're going to talk about that. Um, let's go ahead and jump into the cover because this is an amazing cover for two reasons. One is it looks amazing. The other reason is because it's an homage cover to a certain movie, Lovecraft movie that's probably pretty well known, and we ended up doing a version of this cover that's sort of plays on that. So why don't you talk about how you came up with the design for this cover, how you decided who was going to be where, and all of that.
Yeah, I think this one came in this the idea for this one came in pretty late during the concept phase of the covers.
Hmm.
What I had initially planned was, the usual Scooby Doo covers, and I think there were two versions of an homage for EC Comics,
Hmm.
which would have been fun too. But and then I thought about this one and just threw it in there, and didn't even think that it was going to end up being the cover.
That's always the way.
Yes, because I had concerns about the decapitated head.
It's Anton.
Yeah, but I wasn't sure if you would go for it.
Uh-huh. Well,
And
yeah, go ahead.
but I think at the end of the day, it turned out to be pretty cool to make this cover.
Hmm.
I wasn't really sure I was going to be able to do it justice.
Hmm.
I was having concerns about whether the coloring would turn out right,
Okay.
but I think I just went with it, and
Hmm.
in the end, it turned out great.
See, that surprises me because, like, everything about this works so well for me that I'm surprised that you would have concerns because, anything that glows green is generally works pretty well color wise, especially for the comic that we make. And
Mhm.
just the sort of tongue in cheek concept of it, of Trish being the one doing it, and then Anton's head, and it's so fun. It's creepy and horror, but it's fun. It's like everything that we try to do in the comic, and it's just distilled right here. And uh, the moment you showed it to me, I had no doubts it was this one.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think the initial concept for this, we had to change a few things,
Hmm.
but it was really minor.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're homaging another work, it's always difficult because it's a different medium.
Hmm.
Like, I think the original poster was either painted or a photograph that was
Yeah.
edited
Hmm.
uh, post postwise, and I know I can make the exact image,
Hmm.
but you can never really know whether it's going to work
Hmm.
when it's all put together
Hmm.
because the art styles are very different. But
Hmm.
yeah, it usually ends up looking its own thing,
Hmm.
but it's definitely a homage of that poster or whatever it was.
Yeah, the thing about homages for me is like when the creative team makes it their own thing as opposed to just like a straight copy. Like if it's a straight copy and it doesn't really say anything about the comic you're about to pick up, then it's like, okay, yeah, but this is an homage, but it's also very true to what the story we're telling. If you look at Trish and you see that one half of her face is in shadow and one half is lit up by green, that's really to the heart of who that character is, where there's two parts of her that are going on that we're going to see in this issue. And the idea of Anton, coming to life but maybe losing his head, that's a real risk that Anton faces in this. And then the thing behind them we'll get into, but it works perfectly for what our comic is, rather than just as, oh hey, we're doing Reanimator.
Yeah, and basically, I think this was a two concepts that was merged together. I
Hmm.
mean, the creature in the background was supposed to be in another image,
Right.
and then we decided to merge it so that it will tell more of the story within the pages,
Right.
instead of just a straightforward homage, like you were saying. So
Right.
we mixed in another image so that it would be our own.
Right. And I can't remember, by this point everyone hopefully has read the comic, otherwise they're going to be in for a lot of spoilers, but I can't remember, did we have Trisha's mom as the monster in the background?
There were concepts for that.
Yeah, and I think we decided it was just too many spoilers. We didn't want to spoil it too much
Yeah,
until
yeah, that was
people are doing.
supposed to be a homage to EC Comics,
Hmm.
wherein
Yep.
it's it's it was also quite interesting, but like you said, it contained too much spoilers and maybe clickbait.
Yes. Well, maybe we'll talk about that once we get there a little bit in more. Um, okay. Anyway, I love the cover image, and one of the things that I always like when we do homages or when we do some of these things is then the opportunity to play with the lettering and stuff to make them feel like the old movie poster. And so we did a version of this cover where it was Trish the Reanimator, and really played up the idea of an homage to a poster or an old beat up VHS box or something like that, for the variant cover that we did. So
Mhm.
yeah, I thought that was a lot of fun. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into this issue. We start off with Trish giving the previously, which is new. The concept behind this was, Trish sort of knows more about what's going on than some of the other characters do, especially about her story. So it was kind of a fun opportunity to have her tell the previously to fill in readers on her story, because it's going to become important for this issue. Um,
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I think we're only going to get to use it once.
Maybe.
Um, but you never know. Um, okay, so
Spoiler alert.
at this point, okay, so this story is called Family Business, basically because we have a whole lot of uh, digging into people's families' businesses going on all over the place. We start off at the school. It's snowing. There's a lot of snow recently because we've sort of hit the Christmas season, as we even started with at the very beginning of our season. If you remember, um, the very first issue from this season, Sarah was talking about how it was Christmas time and she was missing all her friends. So it is still Christmas time. It's getting closer and closer, and all of the school is abuzz about the hockey party that's going to happen at the Williams Mansion. Um, Meanwhile, Sarah is begging Alex if she will sort of babysit Sarah's grandma, who is, as we've sort of previously established, she's growing a bit senile, and um, the term sundowner is one that I've heard a lot, where people are sort of okay during the day, but as it gets later and later in the day, and especially at night, they sort of their mind sort of gets worse and worse. And so was sort of thinking that she would feel a lot better if Alex or somebody was watching grandma so she could go off to the party. And Alex is like, I can't. I made promises to go practice, to go learn from Kerwin, some of my magic, and why don't you just go? And Sarah's like, I can't, and um Alex is like, well, there'll be other parties, and Sarah's like, not the parties where Matt wants me to go. um and so, kind of petulantly, she's like, fine, I'll just sit at home. um I I got to tell you, I always love when we have images of the hallways of Miskatonic High and just see random kids walking around, because it feels like more of a real universe as opposed to just our kids, and like they never see anybody else. Um, how do you decide on like what kind of characters? Like this middle panel here, where we have the two girls talking on the left and the guy leaning to the back, and the two people walking in the background. Like, do you just randomly come up with people on the day that you're drawing, or do you have any plans for that, or how do you think about it when you're adding sort of background characters?
It changes from a project to another, or panel to panel anyway.
Hmm.
I mean, I think when you work in comics, you get uh, good with drawing stuff. I mean, there were some times where I would just draw food. I mean, people would ask, "How do you come up with food?" I eat food. I know what food looks like. And so it's the same.
Yeah.
You observe people. I mean, you've got years of experience. I've been to high school myself. I mean, this girl in the edge most, I think she looks like the girl in Wonder Years. I don't
Mhm.
know.
A little bit,
That's
yeah.
what I
Yeah.
feel like.
Mhm.
Maybe it's because I watched that show before. And then the other people, you just, put shades on this guy, put a sling bag on this guy, put her on this girl, and you just constantly make stuff up as you go along. But there's really no plan about going about making crowds. But
Mm.
sometimes there is.
Mhm.
It really depends on the nature of the panel.
Mhm.
Like this one, I wanted it to have, you know, I wanted to put a face on the words being said, so that just like you said, it doesn't feel like the kids are alone in school. That there are other kids there,
Mhm.
and who has their own stories, who has their own personalities.
Mhm.
And it makes it more realistic to anticipate the party. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
there is hype around this party, and
Yeah.
it makes you feel like, yeah, Sarah has a point about going to this party, leaving
Mhm.
her grandma behind, you know, stuff like that. So maybe when you come at this point, it becomes instinctual
Mhm.
in a way. But yeah, it really depends on the project.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So with the next page, we go to back to Miskatonic University, to the Tillinghast Science Center, where Herbert West and Trish have prepped the Anton clone that they have sort of reconstituted from the DNA from the blade. Um, and the way it's going to work is West is going to do his process to reanimate this clone. Meanwhile, Trish is going to use the third eye, um, that her grandfather has taught her, has mystical properties to try and bring Anton's ghost or spirit or soul or whatever you want to call it into the body. That's been the problem all along with Herbert West's reanimated things, that they don't have any soul. And so this is a chance for them to test it with Anton because they know where his soul is. And if it works, maybe this is a process that they can use going forward. Um, so they go ahead, Trish starts um, humming, if you want, really sort of getting into a place where she can try and use the mystical properties to pull Anton in. Meanwhile, Herbert West is going through the process of reanimating Anton. But as we've seen before, with the other ones, Anton's not waking up, that it's just not working. We've seen before that it takes a long time for the process to go. I think it took like 15-20 minutes or something, the ones that we saw in previous issues. But such a long time that Herbert West is thinking, okay, this isn't going to work. Let's go ahead and pull the plug on this. Let's get rid of this reanimated body because there's been problems like this before, like experiment 37, which we will talk about later. But just as he's about to do it, these sort of arms come out of the body and start pulling him into it. And as that happens, Anton's reanimated body wakes up and starts screaming. And we've seen this sort of scream before from reanimated things. It usually signifies that they don't have any higher functions going on in their head. And they're very quickly going to try and kill Dr. Herbert West, which is what reanimated things do. Let's take a moment and talk about this process, because how did you decide, like when I sent you the script, basically said arms come out of Anton's body and pull his ghost form into it. That's not a lot of description. So how did you decide how it should be visualized?
Well, at first I was thinking about doing tentacles instead because
Right, because that's
but
what you do.
but 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 putting actual hands on it made
Mhm.
it creepier,
Yeah.
and then I could use the more tentacle like fingers later on
Mhm.
when, well, we'll discuss it later. But
Yep.
basically it's supposed to be tentacles.
Okay.
That's spirit, more on like spirit tendrils
Yeah. Okay.
that's going to be pulling other spirits into the body.
hmm
So I don't know. There's something about the color.
hmm
I think the script mentioned it was supposed to be a bit pinkish,
Sure.
and the hands just made it creepier for
hmm
some reason, and I decided to keep it.
I really like it.
Because
Yeah.
yeah, because there are manga that
hmm
I've read
hmm
wherein there are creatures that
hmm
when you look from it from afar, it looks like snake, and then
Oh,
when
okay.
you look closer, it looks like arms that are many
Yeah.
arms that are,
Yeah. I
and
think I've
it
seen
just
that.
it's just so creepy to look at. It reminds me of Godzilla, the Japanese one, the
Yeah.
Shin Godzilla,
Uh-huh.
wherein if you see the tail
Uh-huh.
and you think these spikes, but when you look closer, it's actually skeletons of humans.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, it was really creepy. And I always like putting in human elements
Mhm,
in horror,
mhm,
just like in Giger's work
mhm,
in Alien, wherein he always puts the skulls,
mhm,
ribs, and various anatomical parts.
mhm. No, that
And
makes sense.
it just lends. to the horror for some reason. I think
Right.
it reminds us of our mortality.
Mm,
That and this one also kind of reminds us of mortality. That how can something spiritual have these things?
mhm,
Is it possible that there's afterlife after all, or
mhm,
something like that? It just reminds us of our primordial fears about death and
mhm.
the afterlife.
Right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, and I like it because it feels kind of when we talked when we were doing issue 19 with I'm sorry, with Simon and Ren in India and dealing with the Hindus, it feels very much there's an element to it that feels like that where it's, wondrous and not very, Western about it that I like that, it feels like a different kind of magic than we've seen before. So yeah, I
Yeah,
I, I like it. And in my world, you can never go wrong with the blue and pink colors because I think those scream Miskatonic High to me. So yeah, the blue of Anton with the pink of the arms, tendrils, it works. The coloring works perfectly. So s- Anton's reanimated body wakes up and, as the reanimated bodies always tend to do, starts trying to strangle Herbert West because, let's face it, Herbert West just has that face you want to strangle. Um, Herbert West is about to try and shoot the body, but Trish, manages to get through to Anton, and he's able to talk. So we have finally done it. We've finally perfected the reanimation process where Anton can talk. His heartbeat starts going down to proper rhythm. He's able to talk. He's able to remember himself. He's able to swear, so we know Anton's okay. Um, so Herbert West is all excited about this. Trish, meanwhile, passes out from the exertion of it. And as Herbert West is putting her up on the table to sleep it off, um, we see experiment number 37 finally come in. And we see it sort of from Anton's point of view, about, hey, Doc, I finally get why you always say we, because I'm totally seeing double. Um, so let's talk about experiment 37 with using a tombstone as a blunt object, which was something that I really like that we came up with. Um, we have seen Experiment 37 a number of times, all the way back to the first issue of this season, and he's sort of been running around Miskatonic for a while. Um,
mhm.
we I can't remember exactly how we came up with this design. I think it's probably from various parts that we put together. Like we had the stitching going on from when Alex was doing the research. Um, we knew that he was an experiment that Herbert West had done before. So we came up with the idea that he was a clone of Herbert West. The first clone probably that he tried to make, and he tried to make it of himself. As with other reanimated, it went terribly badly, and it escaped, which is why he eventually got the gun and started killing all the reanimated things to keep them from going nuts like Experiment 37. But why don't you talk about pulling it all together? Because, it's one thing to,
Stitching it all together.
yeah, Stitch.
Yeah, yeah. I think people always think that if you make a clone, it will always be perfect.
Hmm.
But even clones deteriorate,
Hmm.
even because it's still a uh, living material. I mean,
Hmm.
it has blood, it has flesh. So I imagine that through experiments, he really a machine.
Hmm.
Even though it's him,
Hmm.
it's like pulling apart things and putting it to another. So I believe he made lots of clones of himself,
Oh, yeah,
but
that's a good idea. Yeah. Hmm.
none of them work perfectly
Mhm.
as a whole. So he had to like jury rig this. He needed this arm from another, this leg from another.
Mhm.
It just makes him even more sick. If you
Yeah.
think about it, I mean, imagine this person who thinks of human life as
Mhm.
just an experiment.
Right.
Just, just it's like a mechanic working on a motorcycle,
Mhm.
jury rigging stuff to make it better, to make it stronger, to make it last longer. I
Mhm.
mean, it maybe some of the things are working well, but it's starting to deteriorate. So he has to
Mhm.
patch it up with new skin. It's not necessarily a new limb, but maybe it's just new skin
Mhm.
that he wraps around and then puts the stitchings or stapler or whatever. It
Oh,
just
man.
makes him more horrible, right?
It does
And that's
when
what,
you explain it, yeah.
yeah, yeah. But the thing is, we
Mhm.
can't really put that in exposition.
Right.
People will have to figure that out. But that's how I imagine it. There
Mhm.
could be other explanations, and readers are free to interpret it the way they want it to.
Right, but I see, I think you're exactly right, and as you explain it, it makes tons of sense. Going back even to the Lovecraft story, the idea of Herbert West is, he sees humans as parts, as things to tinker with and build things with. And really, the idea is that he doesn't think that people have a soul, but really what you're getting at is that he doesn't have a soul. He has no, so of course he wouldn't think about souls going into it. Of course he would think it as just parts on a body, a machine that to go ahead and build. And that's why he didn't have the last tool to go ahead and reanimate something, because he didn't think that was even something he needed. It wasn't until Trish and Anton came on, and revealed that, hey, no, there's this one element that you're missing that you've never even really thought of. So I know I love that explanation. I think that's a great one.
Correct. And for somebody to aspire for immortality is probably also a person
Hmm.
who doesn't think much about humanity.
Right. Very true.
I mean, if you think that you can just make something, if you can just revive something over and over again, and then life begins to lose its meaning because it's just like what I said before. It's just like a car
Yep.
or a motorcycle where if it breaks down, you just buy another one or you just repair it.
Right.
And for someone to have that kind of mentality, you will lose some humanity.
Yeah. And I imagine that there's a number of characters from Lovecraftian and other sort of weird horror science that have lived for a long time or been reincarnated or come back or whatever it is. And you start to notice that about them, where they start caring less and less about the people around them and more just about, making themselves go on a few more years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So next we jump to Simon's house. So last issue we saw Simon and Ren finally get back, that long plane ride from India that took them issues and issues to finally arrive. Um and
It's the Christmas season. Layovers are a pain.
this is true. Good point. Um so Simon can't understand why Ren is there, because I mean they just saw each other, and she's like, "Hey, did you miss me?" And he's like, oh, "We just spent, every minute of the last week together." Um, she of course has her own ideas of what she wants to do. She's like, "Why don't we go somewhere private and organize your dad's papers?" Um, which uh, uh, Simon is like, "What about Matt? Aren't you still going out with him?" And she's like, "Oh, don't worry about him. He's throwing a party tonight." Which Simon's mom hears about. Simon's mom is concerned about Trish because she hasn't really seen Trish in a while. Trish has sort of stopped coming home. Um, for those of you who have forgotten, Trish lives with Simon and his mother since Trish's mother died, because Simon and Trish share the same father who's in prison. for presumably for killing Trisha's mother, which we saw about way back in issue 12. Um, and we'll sort of reference some of that anyway. So Simon's mom asks Simon and Ren if they can go to the party and see if Trish is there. Um, Simon says okay, that he'll go ahead and do it. And unfortunately, as is the case, he needs Ren to give him a ride. Um, we then jump to Sarah's house. Sarah has decided to go ahead and get ready for the party. And she's talking to her grandma. Her grandma, as we talked about, is sort of sundowning and sort of not in the right place, sort of dementia. And she keeps referring to Sarah as Evelyn, who was Sarah's mom, um, and asking if Evelyn is going to see that Williams boy. And Sarah's like, yeah, it's Matt's party, but I'm not Evelyn. She's my mom. Remember, I'm Sarah. Oh yeah, yeah, I remember. Sarah is in that tough spot of she knows that she should stay with her grandma, but she also really wants to go to this party. She's put on the dress that I think we last saw. Um, God, issue 6, I think she put it on for the
Yeah.
Halloween party. Yeah, it's probably the only dress that she owns. Certainly the nicest dress that she owns. Um, so she's getting all dolled up for the party and leaving her grandma, and trying not to feel too guilty about it. Um, let's talk about this because I sort of well, there's no sort of it. I love that image in the second panel of her looking at herself in the mirror, and you can see the doubt, you can see how she's sort of becoming more rat like. You can see that she's trying, to put on the dress and try and doll herself up to look nice, but also maybe she's feeling self-conscious about it. You're able to capture a lot in just, that one panel and on this one page. And I wonder if you could talk about, sort of Sarah as we're sort of starting this issue.
Yes, Sarah has been on a very tragic uh, journey,
Hmm.
and it's kind of culminating in this issue. And we see that, yeah, like you said, she's really starting to amp up the doubt.
Hmm.
And I think it was very important to show that her animalistic features were starting to show. I mean, I think there was a uh, line in the script wherein the tail is starting to bother her.
Hmm.
So we see that in the third panel,
Yep.
but but obviously it's just a part of her body. But so I had to put all of the expression on of her face
Hmm.
in that second panel.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's like pumping herself up, like you can do this.
Hmm.
This is your chance. This might be your only chance. I mean, it has to have dawned on her by this time that there's nothing else she can do.
Yeah.
Um, the process of her becoming a rat thing is very real now,
Hmm.
and looking at herself in the mirror, it's like it's not really more of acceptance, but more of defeat that there's
Yeah.
really nothing she can do, and she just has to enjoy the what's left of what she perceives to be the time of her life.
Right. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So she's taking all these risks right now, and I think we've seen in the last few issues that her personality has been starting to shift, but not really dramatically, but more like erratically.
Yeah.
And I think this will be helpful in how we see her in future issues.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still some surprise.
Hmm.
It's very important for the this time.
Mhm. Yeah, and, it's Sarah, we've talked about this a bit about how sort of the curses that are inflicted upon these kids are sort of also just heightened things that some kids go through normally as teenagers. So, here's a girl who's becoming an adult that she doesn't like. If for a teenage horror comic, we have her becoming a rat thing. In real life, kids are growing up into bodies that they don't like for one reason or another. They're becoming too much like their parents. They're becoming not enough like their parents. They're becoming, they don't understand what's going on with their bodies, all of those things. And then, the fun of this comic to me is that we get to do it in a horror way and get to do it in a, so that, we're showing it, but it's just she's becoming a rat thing. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. You're, I, I've talked about this before with you about how much I've liked how over the course of 21 issues, and really we've been lucky that we've been able to do it over the course of 21 issues, is you can visually see Sarah's features changing and becoming more rat-like. And the real benefit of doing long form comics is that we're able to do that. We didn't have to do it in the span of 2 issues and get to the end of Sarah's story. Sarah's story gets to develop through time, which is really a much better way to tell her story than to have done it too quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you do 4 issues, you don't really get the whole character. You
Mhm.
just see them in that situation and who they are. But like you said, with the opportunity of working on this long form, we can do subtle story um, elements like this, wherein, like you said, can merge horror with teenage angst.
Mhm.
It, it reminds me of great stories back in the 80s,
Mhm.
where kids would be, would just hate themselves because
Mhm.
they're not as popular as this guy or not as popular as that girl.
Mhm.
They hate their body.
Mhm.
They don't have the looks of what's supposed to be popular at that time.
Right.
But like you said, we can do it in a horror kind of way.
Mhm.
And I think that's the right kind of mentality going into writing any form of media, is trying to fit it into the world that you're creating.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've gotten used to stuff like what we see in social media, or reality shows, that we tend to to eschew the traditional storytelling, that we have to we can't relate to everything. We certainly in different parts of the characters, like
Mhm.
how they are kind to their elders,
Mhm.
or how they're great as friends.
Mhm.
We can relate to those things. We don't need be uh, to be so in the nose with certain things. And with stuff like we do in the comics, we can make it like what Sarah is going through.
Right.
I mean, nobody's really becoming a rat, but we know the feeling of anxiety about being a teenager, hiding the
Mhm.
pimple,
Mhm.
hiding a broken tooth or
Mhm.
something like that. I
Yep.
mean, everybody's gone to a wedding, and then why of all days do I have to have the damn pimple on my nose? Kind of
Right.
thing, right?
Yep. Right, and one last bit about this for me is, and we've talked about this, and it's something that you remind me a lot, and I really like it. That it's a part of our comic is here's a situation where, in the past we've treated Sarah as kind of the good girl, and here's a case where she's knowingly abandoning her grandma who is going through dementia and really needs somebody looking after her, and she's making the choice to go to a party instead, which is a total teenager thing to do. And it's like, I think having her do that, like, rounds her out more. So, Sarah's not always perfect. Alex isn't always perfect. We know Ren's not always perfect. We know Matt can be a jerk, but he also can be a nice guy. We know Simon can be a brain and can be snobby, but he also legitimately likes these people and wants to help these people and wants to be a good person. Even Anton. Anton is about as self-absorbed as one guy could get. And even we've seen him, really reach out and try and become friends with people, which is not normally in his nature. So, I like that about our characters is that they aren't just one thing. They act in ways that are much more realistic.
Yeah, definitely, because you can never really tell who a person is by just talking to them one time or kind of in this situation or the other. I mean, you could catch a person on a bad day and you'd have the impression that, wow, this guy's a jerk.
Hmm.
But in reality, he was just having a bad day.
Yeah.
And it's true. It's true with these characters. They're put into extraordinary situations and they have to react the way that they think is right at that time.
Right.
And like I mentioned before, with the age of social media, we just kind of have this face
Hmm.
that we use for social media, and which is totally different for who we are in real life. I
Yeah.
mean, when I think you just had your Thanksgiving,
Yep. That's right.
and when you have your family reunions, you
Mhm.
don't really see them throughout the year.
Right.
You just probably message them through social media or phone or something.
Yep.
But it's very different when you have everybody together, and you know maybe you have some disagreements online, and then
Mhm.
when you see each other again, your buddy buddies again.
Right. Right. That's very true.
And I like that because, like you said, you can't show everything
Right.
with just one panel or just one page. Even the whole issue, you could totally judge a character for her behavior, and
Right.
then all of a sudden, in the very last issue, you understand why she did that.
Right. Right. And again, it's the benefit of the long form storytelling that allows us to do that, that we didn't have to rush it, And so you do get the different flavors of them, and you see them in different situations, with Simon, he's different depending on the characters. When he's with Matt, they don't get along a whole lot very well. But we saw him with Ren. He started off, sort of butting heads with Ren, and by the end of the story in India, they were getting along pretty well. So I don't know. It's just nice to be able to tell the stories of these characters, and to be able to see them do things that might be a little out of character, but that makes it more interesting that they do have these
Yeah,
characters.
I guess what I was trying to point out earlier was that you don't really see what a person's going through 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So, for example, with Sarah, we see her going through that,
Hmm.
and we do kind of understand why she wants to do this.
Hmm.
So, compared to if you just see someone during work or
Hmm.
during school, it's very different. The way you perceive a person is very different.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. So next we have Trish waking up. Uh, we see Anton covered in blood. We see the tombstone in the back covered in blood. And Anton is whispering to Trish, and she's like, "Why are we whispering?" And Anton tells her about the clone thing that killed and dragged off Herbert West, which is very similar to the way the Lovecraft story of Herbert West ended, with the reanimated thing sort of dragging him off. Um, Meanwhile, so Trish, processing this, um, is gathering all this medical equipment of Herbert West and sort of putting it in her bag. Anton doesn't really notice until the last kind of minute, and he's like, "What are you doing? We need to call the cops." And she's like, "No, we have the reanimation process. Now I can finally, do the reanimation that I've been wanting to do all along." So she stabs Anton with the syringe, with the sedative, and puts him to sleep. Um, and she does it somewhat gently, and says, I'll be back, I promise. I just can't let anything stop me now. Um, and we're really starting to get who Trish is, what her main purpose has been most of this time, which is, Anton really thought that she was there to help him out and get a body for him, but really it was kind of a means to an end, which is she wanted to find out for herself how to do the reanimation process because she has someone in mind that she wants to reanimate. Um, we then switch to the party at long last. We've been talking about this party for a while now, and Sarah approaches. There are people all over the place. Clearly, have been drinking for quite some time. And she runs into Jeff, who's helping some guy getting sick outside, and brings him into the main area, passing Chris, who's playing hockey in the hallway, where we find Matt with the crowd in the mansion's sort of main hall, where they display a lot of the old artifacts and especially the family history. And Matt is there getting into an argument with the security guards. Um, and riling up the crowd by shouting about going to regionals. Um, let's talk about this because I think this is great. We've seen this mansion for a while now, and it's always been, very dark and shadowy, and but also very pristine, and well guarded. And it's now already been graffitied, which I love. So, why don't you talk about changing up the mansion for the party? Like, what'd you have in mind for what the party was gonna look like?
Well, you can never really know what's going to happen in parties. So I think I just looked up the what it looked like before
Mhm,
all of this, and just started when you're uh, planning out the page
mhm,
for what's going to happen in the page. You just tend to look at the reference for the setting, and you
mhm,
just think of situations wherein things could go bad or could be fun. So yeah, I just picked up a few things here and there where I could probably put some mayhem in there. I
mhm,
mean, I've been through two wild parties when I was younger, so I kind of know my way around these things. And even though I've been through those parties, I don't think I've never been to a wild party like this.
I
This
have.
one. So yeah, 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 I've never been to a hockey party before. That's for sure. So yeah, it's kind of fun if when you're doing this kind of things, because it kind of really reels you back into the
Mhm,
high school part of the comic series,
mhm,
and it's kind of fun to just see kids having a blast,
mhm,
doing all this crazy stuff. and it just kind of puts the horror in the background, and it prepares you, kind of prepares you for the worst.
Right.
It's the lull before the storm is what I like to call it, because
Mhm,
if you remember,
mhm,
the horror movies back in the 80s were
mhm.
always teenagers going to the lake
Yep.
or having going parties,
Mhm,
and the music videos that kind of remind us of those times.
mhm.
And then usually bad stuff happen during the parties or after the parties
Mhm,
or outside the party.
mhm.
So this is a great callback to those horror movies
Right,
back in the 80s and 90s.
right.
So yeah, it was kind of fun.
Well, so on the second page of this party here that I'm looking at, we have the old, like, Conestoga wagon, like, thing that I remember from, like, issue 13, I think, is how the settlers got to Miskatonic, and we have 2 guys climbing on top of it. One of them is taking off his shirt. It's just, it's I love the way we're sort of, the British have a term, taking the piss out of we're taking the piss out of the Miskatonic history, really just, having fun with it, playing with it, really just not taking it very seriously, which I love. I think this is perfect. I mean, that's exactly what you want is, high school kids just messing up the mansion.
Yeah, yeah, because if you, I think it was what was the issue where Alex and Matt uh, went through the mansion, and I think the wagon was already there, but it was
Mhm.
in the shadows or something like that.
Yep.
And it kind of shows that these kids doesn't really care about history
Right.
or how important these things are. They just want to have fun,
Mhm.
and them trampling through these artifacts really kind of shows the disparity between the old and the new.
Mhm.
And it's great to show that, because there are some heavy stuff that we kind of show in the series,
Right.
but at the same time, although the kids are always in the middle of that, we got to remember that most of the population in the town are not even aware of it at
Mhm.
all.
Yeah.
And so here we show these kids, ordinary high school kids, having fun, and they don't even realize what's lurking behind the shadows. And
It's
it's
yeah,
always great setup for horror.
right, isn't it? It's yeah, I love it. It's yeah. It's also fun because it's nice to see our kids at a party. Like, we've seen them in so many horror situations and so many tense situations and so many devastating situations. It's always nice when we take them someplace and treat them like teenagers where they're just having fun. So we have Sarah shows up and, she's dealing with having a beer. I don't think she's had beer before and just it as you said, we get into the teenage part of it, and it's nice to see them sort of let their hair down and just enjoy themselves for as long as it's gonna last, which, knowing Miskatonic High, it's not gonna last very long.
Yep.
So Sarah, has a few drinks, and then Matt um, tells her that he needs her. This is one of those classic situations where he's saying one thing and she's hearing another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, he's
Mhm.
talking because all of this, remember, the party, Matt is throwing this party to keep security occupied so he can sneak up into the attic. And he needs somebody to sort of watch his back for him to make sure that nobody catches on to where he's going and what he's going to do. Sarah doesn't realize that at all. She's hearing something entirely different about what Matt is doing. Plus, she's had a few too many drinks, and so now she's not even in the right mind anyway. So,
Mhm.
they accidentally bump, and her dress gets covered in beer, as you know, again, happens at parties. Um, and just as something may be about to happen or might not be, Simon and Ren run into the party. Matt and Ren have not seen each other since Ren told him that she was going to go to the Philippines to try and find her mom. And they sort of, kind of, maybe broke up then. Like, it was awkward when it happened and they didn't really settle it. And now she's come back, and Matt goes through this process of finding out that she is now going out with Simon, and Simon is trying to find out where Trish is, trying to ask drunk Sarah where Trish is, and Sarah kind of knows about Anton being reanimated and Trish being involved with it. Um, so you have these series of 4 panels, and I always love when you mirror the images. And so we see Simon and Sarah talking, and then we see Matt and Ren talking, and then we see Simon and Sarah talking, and then we see Matt and Ren talking. And um it's fun. It's any why don't you talk about how you set that up, because I don't remember saying that in the script, so that's obviously something that you came up with. So why don't we talk about this period of starting to bring the characters back together and how you sort of envisioned um seeing it.
No, it was actually in the script.
Oh, was it? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'm just not sure if I did it exactly as the script asked for.
Well,
But
clearly
yeah,
I don't remember, so.
definitely we've done this before.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's always fun to figure out how to mirror image,
Mhm.
uh, and the way the way the last two panels was laid out. It's actually just one image
Right, you
split
can see
into
that.
two.
Mhm.
So, but with comics, it just the panel break just means time
Yep.
passed. So yeah, one after this happened, Simon and Sarah probably walk through another area, and then in comes Matt and Ren,
Right.
and so I just kind of flip the motions of one character to another,
Mhm.
and still mirroring the other. So that's just one way of uh, making it a mirror image, but it's
Mhm.
not a direct mirror image because
No.
the image is kind of flipped with
Right.
one character in front of the other. So
Right.
yeah, you just mix up stuff like that so that it just doesn't become too obvious. But yeah, those kind of subtle image tricks kind of draw the reader's eyes into it, and they just kind of make you think that something's going on here.
Right.
Because with movies and videos, I mean TV shows, the movement of the cameras kind of mimic that same way. Like one
Yep.
person is talking here, and then it gets mirrored with another person talking. So it's kind of uh, emulating that camera work with with still images this time.
Right. And you've talked about this before, about how, sometimes with talking heads, with dialogue, it's hard to make that visually interesting, because there's no monsters, there's not a lot of action. And here's a case where we just have, 4 characters talking, but by doing those tricks of, again, like you said, this is half a panel, this is a half a panel, it's just conveyance of time. It makes it so much more visually interesting. Like, it draws me in, obviously, because I love this stuff. Um, so it's just a period of dialogue, but it becomes visually interesting just by the way that you've handled it. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, breaking things up really helps the way you convey conversations with people,
Hmm.
and then you also still have to kind of show that the party's still going on behind it.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's comics is hard, folks.
It is. People don't know that. Okay, so as this is going on, then Anton runs in. Anton is wearing hospital scrubs from Herbert West, and the four of them are shocked to see Anton actually alive. And I remember when I got to this panel and I was lettering it and had was really looking at it in color, how weird it is to see Anton in the flesh. It just it's he just looks so different, you know? Which is
Mhm.
really cool. It's like the same character, but he just looks different. And so I'm going through the same experience that the kids are going, seeing him in. So Ren is asking, "Are you alive?" And yes, and Sarah's asking, "Aren't you cold in the scrubs?" And he's like, "Yes." And Simon, of course, wants to know where Trish is. So Anton fills him in, um, and they need to go figure out where Trish went, and they figure out, okay, well, she's going to reanimate her mom, so she's got to go to the graveyard to get the body. So Simon and Ren run off because they need Ren to drive them because they're high school kids and only one kid has a car. Um, Anton is going to go with them because Anton has some experience of this and so can help him out. He takes Sarah's coat. Sarah gives him her coat because now he's got a body. He's actually going to be cold. And so he thanks her and um, off they run. Um, we then quickly cut to the graveyard. Simon knows that Trish used to hang out here when she was a little kid, or when her mom died. So I don't know, guess a teenager, um, because it was a way for her to be closer to her mom. We'd already seen kind of some of that when we saw Trish dancing on in the graveyard back in issue 17, I think it was. Um, was it
18.
18? Okay, thank you. Yeah, 17 was Alex. Yeah,
Yeah.
was yeah. Okay. Um, So they go in to the shed that we've seen. Trish is not there, but they know that she's been there. They find the shovel where she's dug up her mom's skeleton. We see the reanimated fluid, the last of it. So we know that she has her mom's body and that she's been um, started the reanimation process of her mother. But they need to figure out where she went, and so Anton knows that she would need her mom's spirit. Ren knows because of her experience with ghosts and lost souls and things like that, that they go through their entire lives over the course of 24 hours, and at the stroke of midnight or just before midnight, they would have to be where they died. So she knows exactly where to go. So they get back in the car. Um, and we cut back to the party. Matt is bringing Sarah up the stairs. Um, let's talk about. So we've talked about how Matt is talking about one thing and about how Sarah's thinking that Matt's talking about something else. One of the things that I really like is you convey that well through their expressions. So you know exactly what Sarah's thinking, not just by the dialogue, but by how you're drawing her. So I was wondering if you could talk about that because you're very good at character expressions and being in the moment. So I was wondering if you could talk about, doing that with the characters, especially in a situation like this.
Yeah, yeah, but it's also down to the character's personality. I
Hmm.
mean, Matt is more outgoing. It's his house, so he's
Mhm,
more comfortable
mhm,
in it, and probably thinks nothing about bringing a girl upstairs.
mhm.
Meanwhile, meanwhile, Sarah is more introverted. Is that
Mhm.
the right term?
Yeah.
And probably doesn't get to go in big houses like this
Mhm,
outside of part of her farmhouse.
mhm.
So she's kind of bewildered. So that's how I saw her. She's just looking around, bewildered, but at the same time, she's probably thinking, "Oh crap! Oh crap! Oh crap! Oh crap! This is really happening." You know that.
Mhm,
So yeah, that's kind of how I try to convey their feelings, is also looking through the individual's personality
yeah.
and how they react in that certain situation.
Mhm,
So maybe that's why it comes off as something natural.
mhm. Well, and I think that's right, and I think good artists do that, sort of. It's almost kind of acting in a way, like, you have to imagine yourself as this character and sort of what they're going through to and what their personality is, to be able to understand, like, how their expression would be, sort of what they're feeling, and I mean, I can tell when I read a comic, an artist who's bringing that out of a character, and those that maybe aren't as good at doing that. So Matt brings Sarah up, gives her a change of clothes, and says he'll be right back. And he's going to go check on the door up in the attic. Meanwhile, Sarah's getting changed, out of her beer spilled clothes. And who should come up the stairs but Chris and a girl. And they're like, "Yeah, come on, we'll go in Crash's room." Um, they go in to make out, and Sarah's there, and Chris and the girl see Sarah in her underwear and notice something, and of course, being teenagers and being kind of dicks, they decide to make fun of her for it. Um, he grabs her and is like, "Touch it, touch it," and she's like, "You should I?" And he's like, "Yeah, do it." Um, Sarah, of course, is screaming at this point for Matt, wants these people to stop. Matt rushes in like the hero he is, like the hockey player that he is, ready to beat up on somebody, slams into Chris, and then notices Sarah and notices that she is growing a tail. Um, this is something that I think we talked about way back in like issue 3 when Ren was filming in the locker room, that Sarah would want to cover up because she's
Mhm.
hiding this thing that's growing. Um, I, how do you put a tail on somebody?
I
Like,
don't
how do you
know.
draw
It
that?
was
How do you know where to
weird.
put it? Yeah.
It's one of the weirdest thing you have to do. I mean, when you're reading a script,
Hmm.
it's usually it's usually very easy to imagine it.
Yeah.
But when you're actually doing it,
Hmm.
you kind of look at the anatomy and where does a tail go in?
Yeah.
If you were a rat person,
Yeah.
does it cover your entire back or back end or what?
Right.
So so I decided to put it in the most logical place. But even then, when I finished drawing it, I just thought, wow, this is weird.
Right.
If this was real life, I get why she'd be freaked out about it. I get
Right.
why Matt would be freaked out about it.
Right. And like that's the thing. Like I don't want to prejudge how anybody should read this comic or their reactions or how they should feel about the characters. But for me, Matt's reaction to seeing this is perfectly natural. It's also incredibly devastating to Sarah that he would have that reaction. Like, it
Yeah,
just, I can't imagine it going any other way. Like, I would be shocked if somebody saw that, and I would probably act shocked. It would be really hard not to act shocked if you suddenly saw somebody with a tail. And it would be incredibly painful because this is exactly the thing. You know, Sarah is already self-conscious about her body and how it's changing, and the last person possible that she wants to see that is Matt, who is, of course, the
mhm.
person who sees it. Oh, man. Okay. This is a
Yeah,
tough
yeah,
issue.
and we were hinting about this before that this last few issues of this season will be very trying
Mhm.
for all of the characters,
Mhm.
particularly Sarah and Matt. But
And Simon.
also,
Yeah.
you have to, yeah, Simon later on,
Yep.
and you just have to remember we were just talking about when Matt and Sarah was going up the stairs, and
Mhm.
Sarah probably imagining something very different, and
Yeah.
then it ends up horribly
Yeah.
far from what she was imagining.
Yeah.
So that's really devastating.
Yeah. You know
And to same degree, I think it's also devastating for Matt because he probably feels uh, very strange in a way that how can Sarah hide this from them?
Mhm.
I mean, Sarah, of course, is open about it
Right.
with Alex, but to the rest, she just keeps it because she's scared.
Right.
She's ashamed.
Right.
And so if like you said, it's perfectly normal reaction
Yeah.
because as a human, you usually don't encounter this kind of situations, and it's very extreme to that extent.
Right.
So your reaction may vary, but in extreme situations like this, definitely Matt would feel kind of betrayed.
Yeah.
At the same time, he's also very, very confused.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think it goes back to sort of what you were talking about when we saw Sarah in the bathroom. That Sarah feels like she's got a ticking clock of how long that she has to have the time of her life. And I think she was trying to push it as long as she could, and to enjoy herself. And, she probably knew because I mean that tail didn't grow just last night. It's been growing for a while. She's known what's coming. That she was going to try and enjoy it as long as she could, and this is probably not how she envisioned it ending, but that this is probably a kind of ending for her.
No, nobody could prepare
Mm-mm.
themselves for a situation like this.
Right.
Like I think if you play any of the character in their place, they'd probably react the same way,
Yeah.
or probably even worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with what's going to follow after these scenes, it's not even the worst thing that's going to happen to her.
Oh
So
man, I
yeah,
know. Oh, okay. So,
apologize, Michael Shea.
I'm sorry. Okay, so she runs from the room crying, as one would expect. Matt goes after her. To say he's sorry or something, and Chris just starts tackling him because, of course. Um, the problem is she's running through the party half clothed. People now everybody can see. Um, all of the party is like, look, Sarah's got a tail. It's like a rat tail. And she's screaming at them to leave her alone. And she makes it as far as the kitchen, and the crowd is just coming around her. And Chris is there. And Chris, being the jerk that he is like, we're not done yet. We're not done here. he wants to see how that thing attaches to her backside, and Sarah grabs at one of the kitchen knives and just slashes at Chris and cuts his face, and is wielding the knife and telling them all to back off so that she can try and get out of there through the back door. And who is standing by the back door but Jeff, who is her one real friend on the hockey team. Um, and Chris is telling Jeff to stop her, not let her get out. And but he decides he moves and he lets her out. He opens the door, and Chris is like, "What'd you do? Why'd you let her out?" And he slams the door on Chris's face and is like, "Leave her be." And he's like, "Why should I? She's a freak." And Jeff says, "We don't talk shit about teammates, Chris," which is one of the first things that Jeff said when we met him when Sarah was trying out for the hockey team. Um,
Mhm.
Meanwhile, Sarah is now running off into the snowy night, still half clothed and holding the bloody knife. Um, this is another tough scene, that we had to go through, which, you talked before about, the 80s sort of horror movies or teenage movies or things like that. And to me, the thing that I always remembered is if something was going to go wrong, it was going to go out wrong at a party where everybody was going to see it. You can't just have something go wrong and one person see it. If you're a teenager, it always feels like everybody is witnessing all of the bad things. And so, it kind of had to be that way for Sarah, that it had to happen at the party where everybody saw it and now everybody knows. um
Yeah,
so
total humiliation.
yeah, yeah, it again, it's the teenage thing about what they're going through, the teenage feelings, and we're just sort of heightening it for the story, you know. Um let's talk about Chris, because we've seen for a while now that Chris is a bad dude. I don't, we saw him a bit at Jeff's house where he was going to visit Jeff's sister. And you could tell he was a bad dude, but like he's become a really bad guy here. And I wonder if you can talk about how you sort of visualized him once you sort of started becoming aware of just how bad he was.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always that kind of kid back in school,
Hmm.
whether it was high school or college or even in workplaces.
Hmm.
But you know, they're typically not the way we depict Chris here. But
Hmm.
since uh, this is a visual medium,
Hmm.
we have to show him being this rebellious kind of character that's
Hmm.
totally different from the rest of the kids. So you just know that he's a kid from the outskirts or whatever.
Right.
But it's just he's just visually different from the other kids,
Yeah.
obviously. So I think it's very important when designing characters that you, you kind of make the main characters more stand out more
Yeah.
than the rest.
Yep.
It's kind of similar to how you see in anime, wherein the background characters look goofy and
Hmm.
kind of cartoonish,
Yep.
and it's not the same thing here, but the main characters just have to stand out, and
Yeah.
that goes the same with antagonists. They
Hmm.
have to stand out. They have to be memorable so that
Right.
when the readers see what they're doing, they'll associate that character with how he looks, how he dresses, so that
Hmm.
the next time you see him, that's Chris. You
Yep.
know it.
Exactly.
You
Hmm.
know it.
Hmm.
You remember that guy in a leather jacket. Or if you imagine Jeff, you'll know immediately that he likes to wear the jersey.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So there's always visual clues for characters,
Mm-hmm.
and you kind of stick to that most of the time, even if they're wearing civilian clothes or just
Right.
everyday clothes. They always tend to veer towards something. Like Ren likes
Mm-hmm.
to wear dresses,
Mm-hmm.
pinks and blacks,
Mm-hmm.
and then same with the other characters.
Right.
They all have their own unique things about them.
Yep.
So when creating Chris, I had to make him just as memorable, if not more than the main characters.
Right.
So he has this spiky hair that it's very different from all the other characters that we've seen.
Right.
And then he's got this really it's not even you can't even call him frightening or whatever. It's just kind of edgy, and
Right.
that's just the subtle thing we had to give him just to make him stand out from the rest of the crowd.
Right. That Chris isn't physically imposing. Like Jeff is bigger and stronger than he is. The thing that sets Chris apart is his complete lack of morality. He has no problem getting into a fight at any moment with anybody, and he doesn't care about any of the consequences. That's what makes Chris scary. It's not the physical. So it's like you said, like visually he has to look different and
It's it's all dress up. I
yeah.
mean, to be honest, I got this look from a 1970s rock star. So
Uh-huh.
we all know that rock stars are not really
Right.
mean dudes. They just dress that way to look mean.
Right.
I mean, come on, they wear scarves while
Right.
performing on stage. That's not
Right.
really mean if you think about it.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, it's just something to make him interesting is what I'm trying to imply. So it's not necessarily designing a character to look evil, but
Right.
more on a character to look interesting.
Right.
So that when you think of that certain character, you kind of recall the way he dresses or the way he looks. It's all visual tricks.
Right. And you're right, because this is now the second or the third time I think that we've seen him sort of visually look like this in those clothes and things like that, which helps, like you said, remind the reader of exactly who he is when he pops up.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so then we jump back to the Trish story. Simon, Ren, and Anton have realized. Well, Ren realized that Trish would go back to Simon's house because Trish's mom died at Simon's house. We saw it back in issue 12 that she got sucked through the window and slammed into the glass, and that's how she died at Simon's house. Um, so as it approaches midnight, she knows that Trish's mom's soul is going to be here. And Trish would know that too because Anton told her that. We saw that in the graveyard. Anton told her exactly where her mom died and where he saw her, which was at Simon's house. So that's where they go. This first panel, I love the reflection in the car glass. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
It
I was trying to think of a way to incorporate the clone. I think it was
Mhm.
specified in the script that he'd be in the background
Right.
or something, but
Mhm.
he it also said not to make it obvious.
Mhm.
So how do you do that
I have no idea.
visually?
That's
So
why I ask you to do it.
I think I kind of forgot it in the first place
Uh-huh.
because the car was already there and there was
Mhm.
no other place for him to be in.
Mhm.
I just thought maybe I could just put a shoulder
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
somewhere.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But then I thought about the reflection, and I said, why not the reflection?
It's so perfect. I love that. It's awesome. Um, okay, so they run in. They find Simon's mom tied up. Trish tied her up. Um, she tells Simon that Trish came and locked herself and that thing in your father's office. And so Simon, Anton, and Ren break into the office, and there they find Trish with her mom's reanimated body, and we can see the lost soul sort of re-going through the last moments of its life, and the tendrils reaching out to try and pull the soul into the body. Um, Trish is clearly in way over her head. She has lost control of this situation, and she calls out for Ren to help her because Ren naturally has the third eye, can see the ghost, can probably maybe do something like that. We don't know the full extent of Ren's abilities with her third eye, but maybe this is something she could do. At least she has more experience with these lost souls and can help her out. But Ren is like, "Oh, I can't. I've never done anything like that." Um, Meanwhile, Simon and Anton are holding down the reanimated body, which is, of course, completely losing itself, as we've seen with all the other reanimated things. And of course, this is when Experiment 37 shows up to make things even worse. Trish manages to get the soul into the reanimated body just as Experiment 37 starts attacking, going after, trying to get towards Trish's reanimated mom. Trish is kind of an emotional wreck. Um, let's get to that in a second. So, we've talked about what Experiment 37 was going to look like, what the reanimated Dr. Herbert West was going to look like. When we talked about Trish's mom being reanimated, how do you visualize that? Because here's a thing that essentially we've seen as a skeleton. We knew that she had essentially reanimated it with the fluid and brought it back to life. But like, how do you design that as a character? Because that's got to be hard.
Yeah, again, you have to look back at the source material, and then
Hmm.
uh, with experiment. What is this guy again?
Number
Experiment
37.
37.
Yep.
He's probably down uh, one of the first 50 or so clones that West was making. So at
Hmm.
that point, the formula wasn't perfected yet.
Right.
Maybe that's why he's a patchwork
Right.
of of a thing.
Hmm.
With the newer formulas, we can see that it's probably a bit more improved.
Yeah.
And at this point, we with the way that the corpse was, I mean,
Mhm.
I can't even imagine. She was already skeletons
Right.
back then, and then that fluid must be one hell of a drug.
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't know if it's due to Trish's abilities itself,
Right.
her, her, her love for her mother or
Hmm.
whatever. But this clone is a bit more refined than what we've seen before. Maybe when uh, West finally uh, saw how they were going to revive Anton, he
Hmm.
made a few adjustments with the formula,
Hmm.
seeing that, yeah, I'm getting close to that perfect serum or whatever,
Uh-huh.
and this is the final form. Unfortunately, he didn't live long enough to see that.
Yeah, poor Herbert.
I mean, at some point, it had to be perfected.
Yeah.
he had to succeed at one point.
Right.
He's done it over and over again. I mean, if you think about number 37, I mean, that's a lot. That's a
Right.
lot. That's a lot of failures if you think about it. But it's not like he stopped after 37. He
Mm.
just kept going and going and going until finally this serum, which was supposed to be the thing that was going to win him whatever award he was thinking about. It's just unfortunate that it had to end up being misused like this.
Yeah.
But the potential was definitely there. Can you imagine if you could bring back the literal dead?
Right. Yeah. I I don't think Lovecraft ever got at it in the story about why Herbert West wanted to do it. It's just always Herbert West had a drive to do it. Um, we, I don't, to my mind, Herbert West is kind of, again, machine like in the way that he did it. I don't think he had any thoughts about awards or money or anything like that. I think he was just driven to do it. He had in his mind that he could perfect this serum and nothing else mattered. It was solely the work to do it rather than the reward for it.
No, actually, we do have an explanation for it, but we can't talk about it right
Yeah,
now.
well, yeah.
I think people has an idea right now that a lot of the Miskatonic uh, antagonists seem to be very obsessed with immortality or
Yeah.
somehow transferring their life to another being.
Hmm.
So I think in future issues, it will become clearer as to why West is doing this
Yeah.
and what the purpose of all these clones were.
Right.
And I think mm, I think we'll have a clearer picture of the whole town itself by
Mhm.
the time we get into that storyline.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we will too. Um, one curious side note was when we were talking about visualizing Trisha's mom coming back, what kind of clothes does a reanimated mother wear? Um, we had already established that Experiment 37 didn't wear any clothes. Um, we had this conversation and ultimately decided let's put a shirt on her. Um, we were just gonna see too much of her. It just didn't make sense to have Trisha's naked mom, reanimated naked mom, just around the office. So decided to go ahead and put
Well,
some clothes on her. So
I think
yeah, go ahead.
I think number 37 would probably think about modesty at the at the I mean it would be far behind his at
Right,
the back of his mind.
right.
He's got other things to think about. Maybe it's just later on when he finally grew hair, he realized, hey, crap, I'm not wearing anything. But this, but but Trish's mom, I
Mhm.
mean, Trish is there. She
Right,
doesn't want to see her mom naked. She
right,
put something on her mom. I mean, she reveres her mom.
right,
She's obsessed with bringing back her mom.
right.
She has so much respect, even digging up her body. She still has so much respect for her mom,
Yeah.
and I think that's why we see her in at least the top shirt.
Mhm.
I think at the back of her mind, she still thinks that this wasn't going to work.
Yeah, I
And
think right.
I think she's still surprised that it actually did work.
Hmm.
And seeing her mom right in front of her,
Right.
I think she's still. doesn't believe what's going on, even though she's been obsessing about this for most of her life.
Yeah. And also, I mean, Trish has been through a lot today. She reanimated Anton, then saw the after effects of Herbert West being bluntly killed with a tombstone by his reanimated clone. She now knows the process by which to reanimate her mother, as you said, which is she's obsessed with, and now she's actually managed to do it. You know, I'm not sure Trish is really in a very thinking very a very rational state right now. So yeah, I think she would probably put her mom in some clothes, but she probably had some other thoughts going on as well, and so maybe didn't finish, or maybe got so far, or as you said, maybe she was more excited about starting the reanimation process. You know, again, Trish is going through a lot right now.
And you think Sarah was going
Yeah,
through a real rough patch there.
right. Well, and that's the thing. We've hinted at it for a while, and it's not just Sarah. Sarah is having a bad day, but she's not the only one. It's going to be bad for a lot of characters for a while. Um, so Trish is ecstatic, excited, relieved, amazed that she's managed to reanimate her mom and is able to tell her, and her mom starts talking. And so her mom is only the second reanimated thing that has talked. All the others have been silent except for that screaming. Um, and at first, Trish thinks that her mom is talking to her, but it turns out that her mom is repeating the last things that she said before she died, as we had seen back in issue 12. Um, and then she starts rushing at Trish and sort of rushing her towards the window, which is where she died. Um, Meanwhile, Anton and Simon are being tossed around by the Experiment 37 because let's face it, Simon could get tossed around by just about anybody. And Anton, is brand new reanimated, so who knows how much muscle mass he's got. Um, and so of course, Trish gets smashed into the window, which is the exact same place that her mom died. Um, and her mom just keeps shoving her towards the smashed window, trying to sort of throw herself out of the window itself. Um, we see the mom get outside, and we see that Trish has been impaled on the pieces of window. And Simon goes and he talks to Trish, and Trish, even as she's dying, she's just her accomplishment at having done what she set out to do, which was to bring her mom back. That was really all she wanted to do, was just bring her mom back. Everything has been sort of geared to that because she's been so excluded from everybody else, hasn't really had much of a home life, and really just all of her thoughts were to this very moment, to bringing her mom back. And she she thinks she did it. She thinks she accomplished it. That's how she died. And this is a tough one. How this is a tough scene. So it's a lot more action oriented. We have Experiment 37, we have the reanimated mother, we have them smashing towards the window. But even still, I mean, was it hard for you to visualize this? Was it an easier thing to draw? And then you have this heightened death scene at the end. Like, how does that work for you?
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely not easy. There's a lot of things going on here,
Hmm.
lots of window shards.
Yes.
So yeah, technically it was very difficult, but also emotionally it's very tough because
Mhm.
uh, even though these are just characters, it's still tough to see them go through these things.
Yeah.
And knowing the history of each of the characters, you can't help but imagine how these people are going through at this time because even though we work in comic books,
Mhm.
there's still some emotional resonance there
Yeah.
that's very human, and that's what horror brings out in most of us is our humanity.
Mhm.
And seeing Trish die there and everybody witnessing it,
Mhm.
it's very tough. Like you said before, Sarah was having a bad day, but at least she's still alive.
Yeah.
And I think aside from that, we also talked about how this obsession with power and
Mhm.
how it slowly corrupted Trish because, like you said, she just wanted to revive her mother at
Yeah.
all costs. She didn't even think about the consequences of her action,
Yeah.
how it will affect his family and how it will affect the people around her,
Mhm.
and also what it will do to her.
Yeah.
I mean, we 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 went through the whole storyline with Simon and the Hindu mythology, and we all know that reincarnation and karma are
Mhm.
part are heavily part of that belief system.
Mhm.
And with this one, we really drive it home.
Yeah.
We reincarnated not just one person but two,
Yep.
and at the same time, we saw the consequences of that action. I
Right.
mean, I think with magic, you can really abuse it.
Yep.
But here we show how dangerous it can be.
Right.
And it's not yet even over. As we, as we see, we don't even know what happens to the clones and
Right.
where they go and
Right.
what they'll do in the future.
Right.
So, so all the actions that Trish has done is not yet even revealed fully.
Right.
So yeah, that's really part of the horror
Mhm.
elements of this. So if you still think, like I said, we showed the party and it was really ridiculous.
Yep.
But now that this is happening, I think it's starting to hit back at that horror element.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to do that. Like you said before, you've got to show how important the characters are. I
Mhm.
mean, you have to care for them
Right.
so that when something bad happens during the horror elements of the story, you really root for them.
Right.
And if you don't care about any of the characters at all, then what's the point of
Right.
reading or watching these these uh, these shows or these comic book series? So
Right.
yeah, definitely characters are very important, and how you portray them is very important.
Yeah. And I think, if people want to think about that, think about the storyline for Trish. We basically introduced Trish's storyline knowing very, at least for us, that she was going to be obsessed with bringing her mom back. And that's a perfectly fine storyline. There's a number of ways that you could do that, but we also wanted to make her a sympathetic character. As you said, we weren't going to care about her death if we didn't care about her life. And so, we saw that issue where she was with Anton and talking about her life, and we saw her dancing in the graveyard. And we know that she's a messed up character, but also that we can relate to that because we understand that she's feeling very isolated and that she's missing her mom and that she has this trauma in her life that really broke her. And
Yeah.
and so that by when we get here and she dies, we know that she was a messed up character and we feel bad that she was a messed up character and that it led her to this, which is ultimately what killed her.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not like we designed Trish to be this evil character,
Right.
cartoonish villain or whatever.
Right.
She's just an ordinary kid that
Yeah.
just had an extraordinary life
Yeah.
and experience,
Hmm.
and that brings about extraordinary situations down the line. And
Right.
so she paid the ultimate price for that.
Yeah. And there was something that you mentioned. I don't know. I can't even remember when you mentioned it, but it struck home with me, which is when you start playing around with eldritch magic and things that you don't really understand, there's always a consequence to that. You don't know what the consequence is going to be. You don't know that it's always necessarily going to be bad, but it's probably not going to be good. And you partake of that magic knowing that there's gonna be some kind of consequence. And ultimately that was the consequence for Trish, is that she thought she was in control of it. Trish was kind of like Simon, where she thought she was so smart that she could figure it out and wouldn't have to face those consequences. But as we see, that's not true. Simon knows that now. Trish knows that now. You can't think your way out of these consequences. They're coming. The best you can do is
Yeah.
try to avoid them as best you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always been apprehensive of magic in
Hmm.
storylines because they're usually glamorized
Hmm.
and abused in some instances. And I always think that characters who use magic are overly powerful. And
Yeah.
it's like this is like a warning for everyone who thinks that magic is power
Mhm.
incarnate or whatever, because with eldritch magic, there's always a price to pay.
Hmm.
It's always seductive
Hmm.
at the beginning, but at the end, it will it will ask for a price,
Yep.
and this is what we get for that. And
Yeah.
I think I like that. I like having a limitation to magic and power. I
Yeah.
mean, not everybody. For example, even if a character has these abilities, they should always have um, an inherent weakness
Yep.
to make them immortal or unbeatable, and just leads to characters being ultimately boring.
Right. And I think as a reader it helps too. So like, when I read, Harry Potter or something and magic happens, I don't ever think about the consequences. But people who have read 21 issues of Miskatonic High now know that, if magic is happening in the story, there's something bad lurking that's going to happen sooner or later. And that creates that drama, it creates that sense of tension, that sense of dread that something's going to happen. You don't know what it's going to be. It's going to be
Yeah.
bad for the characters and it's coming.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Harry Potter, and I kind of think differently about that because
Hmm.
Voldemort himself
Hmm.
is the very is the very example of how to abuse magic,
Yeah.
because he was so obsessed with becoming the most powerful wizard that
Hmm.
ultimately it warped him
Yeah.
into what he became.
Hmm.
And I think there was a point in the story wherein Harry himself was questioning whether he was just like Voldemort,
Yeah.
because he he was slowly acting differently, and also his magic was also growing,
Hmm.
and he was probably thinking that, am I going to end up just like him?
Right.
It's the same with addiction. It's
Hmm.
like, you see, they say that Golem is
Hmm.
like the epitome of, it's like an example of addiction. It's like
Okay.
he's
Uh-huh.
so obsessed with the ring that eventually it destroys him.
Yeah.
And people kind of look at Smeagol and root for him to break it, to
Yep.
break that addiction.
Hmm.
So, so in the end, he doesn't break that. He still goes for it, and it ends up killing him.
Right.
So yeah, magic always has a price,
Yes.
even though it's wrapped around magical stories like Harry Potter and
Right.
Lord of the Rings, and you just think that, nah, there's no consequences with magic. I think there is,
Hmm.
all of it. It's just very subtle.
Right. No, that's a good point, and I think you're right. With ours, I think that the consequences are probably a bit more immediate than that, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the way we handle the magic here is very different, and I kind of prefer that
Yeah.
from what we talked about earlier.
I do too. It fits our story better. It fits the comics sort of better, and it fits sort of more the horrific tones of it.
Yeah, the I
Yeah.
mean, we haven't even delved into the cosmic horror aspects that much. I mean, it's there
Hmm.
underneath the storylines, but I mean, there are reasons why these things are happening
Right.
in and around Miskatonic, but we'll get to that when we get to it.
We'll get there. Okay, so we see the two clones sort of run off into this crazy snowy night. Um, Anton is telling Ren that this is one messed up night, and she says, Anton, I don't think it's even over yet. And then we cut back to the mansion where Matt's mother is pulling up to the gates about to uh, deal with the consequences of this party. That's where we stop. This is a two-part issue. The second part will be in issue 22. Another doozy of a story. Man, there's so much crazy things. Um, let's go ahead and close it out there. Let's I don't even want to hint too much at what's coming. It's bad. It's bad for so many characters.
Yeah, if you think this issue was bad, wait till you get to the next one. This was just setup.
Yeah. If you don't think it can get worse, just wait.
Yeah,
Um, but I I I think we talked about this a little bit before about how we took this season and sort of spread all the characters out to see that they can't really handle things on their own. And as a writer, the challenge is to then bring it all back together in a way that's going to fit all of the characters well, bring all the storylines together. That's going to wrap it up pretty well. And I'm really happy with the way this one is turning out, and as you'll see with next issue, that all of these threads are coming together at this party. That I think it worked really well. And I think readers will know that after next issue as well. Um, do you want to? Why don't we talk for a minute about what's coming up? Because you had alluded to at the beginning about issue 25. So that is coming up. That's going to be a very special issue for us. It's going to be what, like an issue and a half worth. It's a special giant issue. We're going to see a lot of characters from Lovecraftian lore. Um, we're going to see the kids put on a school play. Um, and it's going to be a play that's very important to the very idea of our comic book, uh, Breakfast Club in Hell. So yeah, I'm excited about that one. I can't wait to get that one out there. But we got a few issues before that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. How about you?
Can you still hear me? My earphones died.
Oh, did they? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I can still hear you.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's working through the camera now. So yeah, I'm sorry if the audio changed.
Nope, you're good. You're good.
Yeah, yeah. Talking about what were we talking about?
About issue 25.
Yeah, are we allowed to talk about that now?
Yeah, of course. As long as we don't spoil anything that happens between now and then.
Yeah, yeah. It's supposed to be a celebration for reaching the 25th issue, so expect some some interesting cameos from there,
Hmm.
surprise guests,
Hmm.
and like I said, it's pretty much what the concept of the whole comic book series is
Hmm.
break, Breakfast Club in Hell.
Hmm.
So we're literally making a story about that.
Uh-huh.
I think I think the I think you had two two drafts for this story,
Hmm.
and the first was actually what's going on now. Yes, I said celebration, and there are balloons all of a sudden. Did you see
Yay!
that? Anyway, yeah, I think you came up with two
Hmm.
drafts, and the first one was very different from what we ended up. And I think the one we're going to work on is really really good. I mean,
Hmm.
when I read it, I said, "Wow, this is a great concept," and I think you really nailed it with the story beats there.
Hmm.
And I think when you're talking about surprises, this
Hmm.
one has them in spades, and I think you'll really be surprised until the very end. It just keeps ramping up, and then at the very end, when you think that things are going this way, it goes in the
Hmm.
opposite direction in a good way.
Right.
In a good way.
Oh man.
And yeah, I'm very excited for that.
I can't wait to see you draw all these cameos, and I can't wait to start sharing them with people because I think the people who like our comic are going to be so excited about this once they start getting an idea of what it is. Anyway, it's going to be a complete celebration of
Yeah, but we still have a few more issues
Mhm.
left before that, and even those are bangers. I
Yep.
mean, 23 is like a reintroduction of the series, and
Hmm.
then we have 24,
Hmm.
which is going to be a lot of fun as well. I
Hmm.
think I think people will love that too. And
Yeah.
so yeah, we got loads of stories coming up.
Hmm. Yep, we do. So in the meantime, what we'll do is we are in the process of getting issue 21 printed. Once it's printed, we'll go ahead and get it mailed out to people. Um, we'll then probably in early January go ahead and launch the campaign for issue 22. Um, so I keep an eye out for that, and we'll go ahead and let you know. So yeah, 2024 issue 22.
Yeah,
Yep, yep, and
can't
then
wait.
yeah, and I always get excited, and I know there are a number of our readers who are really looking forward to getting that big hardbound copy of this entire season. You
Oh
know,
yeah, yeah, one's
yeah,
coming. I
yeah,
mean, they're really nice to put together
hmm,
in the books. If you have a bookshelf, they really look nice together. So I'm wondering if we get to a nice amount of hard bounds, maybe we could put out an omnibus.
Oh yeah, there we go. Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah,
You could always
all the paper.
you could always use it as a rat killer or something.
Yeah.
Just put a piece of cheese there or something, and
Wham.
they're
Uh,
so massive. They're so impressive.
right?
Those
Yep.
those omnibus. Yeah,
I
I
don't know
want to
how
get
people
them.
I don't know how people
Yeah,
do it. I
I
can't
get the